Alrighty, thanks everyone for joining. I know it's 7:30 here in Melbourne on a Wednesday evening, so amazing to have you all. And we have another. Well, it's my first webinar of the year. I know Dave, you've been in a million from from what I
Yeah.
keep seeing. Hope everyone had a pretty good 2025 and the break. I know I'm sure I am pretty refreshed and coming back into the new year with a new perspective. And the markets is the main thing. It's on everyone's mind. Is Crypto's been a bit of a sleeper, and probably the best time to have a webinar is off the back of last night. We have in the morning we had a pretty good reaction overall. So a lot of energy's come back, and yeah, pretty stoked to host this today. Dave, Kane, and I, we always want to give free value and find opportunities to, support people where we can and find trends and narratives. And what we really do well is we combine a fundamental analysis view with a technical view, and we'll make it very engaging. So today, the reason why we wanted to host this was because we wanted to. I had a lot of clients that we noticed that were, holding quite large multi-million dollar XRP positions, and it's a very hot topic. It's a polarizing asset, so we want to make sure that people have the right information, separate, all the facts from all the noise, and understand why is it that it's so polarizing. So that's why we've got this headline here. We'll have a Q&A towards the end. You can kind of ask questions throughout, and we'll collate them towards the end for a nice Q&A at the end. But for now, we're going to be covering off the 2026 market outlook. And so, yeah, we'll crack on through it. So we have a bit of a background into who we are. I mean, of course, you're probably all familiar with Dave, myself, and Kane if you've watched prior webinars. But so I'm the broker team lead at UpTrade. I've been doing crypto trading investing for about 9+ years now, getting to the ninth year in 2026, supporting about over these days 350 high net worth client portfolios and leading the brokerage function. Kane, I'll let you introduce yourself just quickly, and then Dave, don't think you need to introduce yourself too much.
Amazing. Yeah. So my name is Kane Bizzoni. I'm head of research and analytics at UpTrade. I've been in the market for about 7 years, the crypto market. I've been able to work at places like Apollo Crypto, which is a institutional hedge fund for crypto. Also doing work in VC, doing deal flow for them as well. So had my fair share of experience in the field.
And me, yeah, and me, guys, David Bird, or some of you might know me as ASX Trader, co-founder of Master of the Markets, and yeah, you may have read some of my stuff on mainstream media, featured on News Corp, and may have seen me down at Oz CryptoCon on stage down there as well. So I'm a certified financial technician, so I'm a chartist at heart, and everything that I do is mostly around what I see in the charts. But funnily enough, a lot of the times the charts align with the fundamentals. So I'm excited to see what the boys, I've heard all this buzz about XRP and why the fundamentals are so strong. I've been hearing about it for a long time. And a year ago, I did a video about that going, well, guys, all these things you're talking about, I can actually see it in the chart. And this is what I'm seeing happening. So yeah, no, excited to see what I'm seeing now as well.
Amazing. Yeah, we were talking about this in the office. Actually, there was one person, we won't name it, who's in the room or from UpTrade, but I think they had 2 million XRP back in around 2015. And if you did a bit of maths on that, it's quite a lot today. And we're just having a bit of a laugh about the story of XRP. So let's cover off what people will hopefully cover off and learn today. So a bit of fundamental analysis on XRP. We're going to look at some institutional interest and ETF flows, which Kane will cover. We're going to look at perceived value versus, I guess, the current value. Why is it so speculative, and what's the current actual utility of XRP? Dave will chime in for some technical analysis on the asset and look at a fun little journey it's been on the last year or so and potentially where it could get to based off some technical analysis, and then some bullish, bearish, and neutral price targets based off some of the research that we've seen in the space. So these are the topics that we'll cover today. Pretty standard across fundamental analysis, market outlook, XRP's value. We'll look at the outcomes, and then, yeah, topic 4 will be then Dave will take it away. Cool. I want Kane, I'd love for you to, I know that we're fresh into 2026. The market's up. Everyone's excited. I know I've been here all day getting orders in for clients. So I know based off that activity, how much interest there is and sentiment's positive. So yeah, I'd love for you to take it away and just give us a bit of at a bird's eye view, a glance of what's happening, what's causing this kind of strength come back in the market.
Yeah, definitely. I think 2026 is gearing up to be a pretty good year for markets in general. We've got the US easing, so we've seen specifically in the back end of 2025, we started to see things like interest rates falling in the US, which obviously means people have more disposable income. People can, not worry about how much money they're spending on their mortgage. That means they've got more money to actually start to invest in different asset classes, especially like things like Bitcoin and risk on assets. They tend to do extremely well in these types of environments. So on the right, as you can see, there's a little bit of a correlation that we've been able to, track over the last few years where interest rates, when they fall, so specifically in the COVID period where they were near zero, Bitcoin had a massive run up. Basically, every market did. We saw like the Rolex, the watch market, I think even Pokemon cards, things like that. Everything was booming because everyone had way more money to start to spend. And then on the left, what we have is just looking at what the balance sheet of the Fed is and how this kind of looks at quantitative tightening and quantitative easing. We've been in a pretty big period for the last few years of quantitative tightening. It means they're reducing the assets on their balance sheet. So they're actually actively selling assets that they hold. That actually ended December the 1st. We're now in a stagnation period and we're hopefully looking at going into easing coming into 2026. So that's where they're actually going to start putting or adding assets back into their balance sheet, putting more liquidity into the market overall. So this is the exact type of environment we like to see for risk on assets in particular. And yeah, and on top of this, there's been a lot more regulatory clarity coming into 2026, as well as institutional adoption. For example, the spot ETFs, massive for crypto, especially, they started in 2024, just with Bitcoin. We then got Ethereum, and then in the back end of 2025, we got both XRP and Solana. These are upwards of I believe Bitcoin sitting, at $150 billion in assets under management across all ETFs. We've got Ethereum at 22 billion, Solana at half a billion, and then XRP, which is still relatively new at 1.2 billion as well. So obviously this goes to show how much institutional demand is coming into this asset class. And specifically, we've seen things like BlackRock, even JP Morgan. These are like the biggest asset managers in the world. They're now experimenting with crypto and tokenization. So they've launched funds on Ethereum, so tokenized money funds, and they even use, I believe BlackRock's even using XRP's stablecoin, I think it's called RLUSD, as a way to, to utilize that on the Ethereum chain as well. So they're using the technology that Ripple is, being built with, but also they're not limiting themselves to just one chain. I think they're going to be pretty broad with this stuff. And these are the same guys, including the Bank of America, who are saying like recommending up to like 4% of your portfolio into Bitcoin and digital assets. So it's a really interesting year. 2026 is gearing up to probably be pretty bullish in terms of regulatory clarity for this industry. And that kind of leads us to the final thing I'll touch on, which is the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. These are two really important frameworks that have the Genius Act passed last year. This is around stable coins and issuing stable coins, basically making sure that it's backed one-to-one backed, so that there's no dispute around these and people can actually use them in a really safe way. And then the Clarity Act, which is a bill that is hoping to pass in the next couple of weeks. This is the really big one around the framework of innovation with crypto and blockchain and how you can actually adopt it for corporations. So there's been a lot of, I guess, uncertainty around tokenization and how people can actually start, investing in this asset class, because some people think it's a security, some people think it's commodity. This will be exactly what we need to make sure that they have the confidence in investing in this industry. So that will hopefully pass in the next couple of weeks. I think that will be the beginning of a lot more corporate and institutional adoption.
Amazing. So, yep, this next slide's a little bit of fun after a bit of talk about institutional adoption. don't have actual polls, so maybe in the comments if you want to write, what price do you think XRP will reach by the end of the year? I think 2026 is going to be a monstrous year, a lot of optimism. So just keen to see what some of the responses are. And yeah, I guess the last response, if you're very, very excited about XRP this year. Not sure if you can bring up some of the comments.
I'll see if I can see.
Always good to start off with a bit of fun.
Above 10, hopefully, maybe 5 to 10. Few people around that range.
Okay. So I guess we're currently hovering around 215. So, a bit over double. Some people are thinking maybe triple by the end of the year. Let's have a look and review at the end of the year what happens next. Next thing is, how long have you been riding the XRP roller coaster? I know I personally, my first exposure to it was a very long time ago in 2016 on BTC markets. Can't even remember what the price was back then. I think it was just around in the sense maybe when I first got exposed to XRP, but it's something that people have held for a very, very long time. And usually people have a very long-term outlook about it. They think it's going to play a very important mechanism or method in the new financial system. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of people holding it for more than 3 or 5 years or potentially even multiple cycles. So awesome. So let's talk a little bit about it. And I think it's important to have a bit of a bird's eye view of what, the difference between XRP, the difference between, Ripple as an example. Because the thing is that there's one thing which is, Ripple is a private, fintech company, financial technology company that builds payment solutions. XRP is a digital asset which is designed specifically for fast, low-cost global payments. It runs on the XRP ledger. It's decentralized and it's a blockchain that pretty much settles transactions within 3 to 5 seconds. It's got very, very low fees. It operates 24/7, 365 days a year. So what you can see, and pretty much the difference is important because one is, creating technology for the new financial system, which is going to be maybe helping out the Swift method of messaging and how that works. And one is as well as that can create pathways for stable coins. But XRP's main purpose is effectively to be used as a bridge asset. It pretty much allows money to move between different currencies and payment systems instantly. And that's without the need for pre-funded accounts. We'll talk about what that means later on in the future. Everyone that's used XRP knows it's lightning fast to send transfers. And now banks and central banks across the world are piloting use cases and seeing what that looks like. So a lot of these banks use RippleNet, which is, I guess, another fintech technology company. It helps with, which is a global payments network, and it helps with pretty much using XRP for instant cross-border settlement. So the primary goal of Ripple is to enable payments everywhere across the world, and that's what we're seeing here on the screen. It's focused on using XRP to address a $10 trillion problem. We'll talk about what that is. It's trapped capital that's required for these cross-border payments. It's effectively where things get held up, bottlenecks, multiple intermediaries, and this is what we refer to as a payments use case. So specifically, that's what XRP was built for. Very, very fast settlement times, about 1.5K transactions per second. Not sure, Kane, how that competes with Visa these days. And it consumes a very small amount of energy. So with the energy efficiency, with the cost saving and being open source, there's a lot of different, I guess a lot of adoption that can come from that in applications. And we'll talk about what that means in a moment. So we want to talk about the main reason why we're here today is, it actually sparked from a client of mine that I realized was so passionate about XRP. I met them in Thailand recently, and we were discussing, and this person's got a multi-million-dollar XRP position. And one of the things that he said to me was, George, I just want a safe place to transfer 50,000 XRP at a time. I want to make sure I have a safe custody. I know that I'm going to somewhere I can, make sure that I can sell and have that liquidity available. And it just made me thinking that, this is not a conversation I've had one time, it's hundreds of times. And it made me believe that, okay, there's a huge community behind XRP. I think we all know it. A lot of people are very optimistic. So why is it doing so well? So there's a huge narrative, right? That's always very important. I mean, the fact that it's ranked, 4, 3, 4, it always competes with, top 5. Is it fixing or is it replacing the Swift system? Secondly, how does XRP help the new financial system in CBDCs? Thirdly, how does it help with an institutional and regulatory alignment? And what are the utility, transparency, and the real use cases? We've just talked about that in a little bit of detail around cross-border payments. So that's kind of a very, very big theme. And it's not just another crypto. People see it as a vision for like a faster, more efficient global financial system in the new world as we're heading towards, as we know, digital currencies, CBDCs, cash is diminishing. People are really seeing it as a really clear solution to one of the biggest problems in finance, and that's slow, costly cross-border payments. With XRP, and I've used it, I'm sure everyone has as well, it can move value across the world in seconds and without pre-funded accounts and at a fraction of the cost. That alone is absolutely massive upgrade for banks and institutions that are relying on the decade-old systems. And this is a very important thing here. So in addition to that, Ripple pretty much positioned itself as very closely aligned with regulators, with financial institutions, with global payment networks. And this institutional alignment, it gives the asset a lot of legitimacy and credibility. And we've seen that with the ISO standards. It's aligning itself with the ISO standards, which is what some of the biggest governments and institutions use to align on their cohesive messaging and how they communicate and also factor in compliance. So this is why XRP is often associated with interoperability between all these organizations. And I think it has a role in the new financial system. And so it's not really about hype. There is a lot of hype, but there's a lot of real utility here. And I personally believe that it can be a more efficient method of cross-border payments and infrastructure. So that's what keeps the community very loyal, very energized. And we see clients who I have clients who say I'm not going to sell XRP ever, and it's over 5-10 year time frame. But I guess that's one way of looking at it. If more use cases come from it, I think as we know with crypto, value comes from, I guess, underlying demand for the asset, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. So we mentioned this in a bit of detail. It's very important to understand. Well, I don't know if people here in this chat, maybe you can write in the chat, have you ever done a Swift payment transfer or a wire transfer for the US clients? How has been your experience? I know that Swift's often, and from my experience, it gets stuck with intermediary banks. It can take sometimes longer than 2 to 5 business days to transfer money. What else? Funds can end up held up into intermediary banks and they don't convert the currency. There's a lot of steps in that process that a Swift payment has to go through, which can end up tying up billions of dollars in idle workflows for these organizations. That's very costly for institutions. Settlement can take hours or even days for it to settle in the back end. And these Swift payments, they must go through multiple intermediaries, clearing banks, foreign exchange providers. There's a lot of delays, risks, and costs associated with that, and even unpredictable charges. Sometimes the banks end up charging us a small fee just to receive money, which is, it's something that they just charge out of the blue and you don't really know about it. You don't know how much it's going to be. So this is from an institutional end. And really, XRP has a place to actually improve that workflow. And you can see and read here, it's very small, but Ripple's XRP ledger can settle transactions in 3 to 5 seconds. So I'll talk about how that would potentially work in the real world, but effectively they would use XRP. Let's think about it like this. So the old system, imagine it like a global business, right? You got a business, you got 20 countries that you're working with, and to serve those customers in those countries, you're forced to store boxes of cash in every single warehouse in the world because you have to pre-fund it. That's what pre-funding means. This is what the traditional banks do and the Swift system. And you're not sure when your client orders or customer orders will come in, but you keep these warehouses full just in case. So it's the same thing with how they pre-fund their accounts across the world. And because of that, it's costly, slow, and the money sometimes sits idle doing nothing. And that's how the banking system works. Now, with XRP, this is the modern way. Imagine instead of storing boxes everywhere, you pretty much have an instant teleporter within, I guess, 3 to 5 seconds that you can just send a box to the warehouse, and the banks don't need money sitting overseas. They can simply, let's say the bank wants to send Australian dollars to a bank from Australia to an overseas bank in Portugal. They would send AUD, they'd convert it to XRP, they'd send the XRP across the world in seconds, convert the XRP to, say, the euro, and then that's done. It arrives at the destination, the settlement happens in the back end. We're getting very technical here, but it just eliminates so many intermediaries that all it allows for is the bank to keep that capital at their home base and only move it when it's needed, right? So we want to talk about how does XRP actually complement Swift? So a lot of people mistake it that it's going to replace the Swift system. It does fix the part that Swift doesn't handle, which is the settlement, right? So Swift is a messaging system. It's not a money moving system. It tells the bank what to do, but it does not settle the actual funds in the underlying back end. So this is a way that XRP can have instant settlements. It can have 24/7 uptime, no need for pre-funded accounts, and pretty much the banks can still use Swift as the messaging system, but they can use XRP for instant settlement underneath that. And that reduces a lot of friction in the Swift system. And it's actually a very, very large upgrade in the grand scheme because there's no middlemen, there's fewer hoops, and it's actually, yeah, it makes it much more seamless. So let's let's move on. Maybe if there's anyone in the chat that wants to write their experience about them doing a transfer internationally, especially for US clients or even anyone in Portugal or abroad, just to sort of explain, and then you really start to understand the value of XRP when you experience those pain points. So we mentioned earlier about institutional government adoption. Standard Charters gave an interesting, I guess, bullish base case and bearish scenario for XRP for this year. And you can see here one of the biggest banks in the world that are actually using RippleNet, the financial technology company, to increase the adoption of Ripple's payment infrastructure. And these are all banks that are currently testing out, the underlying settlement of XRP. So remember what I mentioned earlier about eliminating pre-funding accounts? Without getting too in the weeds, XRP, effectively to utilize that function, you would need to have XRP in your books to then use it as the bridge asset when you are doing foreign exchange swaps or converting from AUD to euros, as an example, which I gave to you. So that requires people to actually buy XRP to have in their system to then use for that teleporting analogy I gave earlier. And that's where, as we know, for an example, with the Ethereum boom or the Solana boom, like for an example, Solana went up because people had to buy Solana to buy meme coins. Or if you wanted to have Ethereum DeFi applications on Aave or Uniswap, you needed to buy Ethereum to get access to that. It's the same thing here. If more banks adopt it, if central banks adopt it, they'll have to buy XRP, which then creates demand for XRP to be used in this cross-bridging process. So I guess there are a few examples here that Standard Charters has given. So let's talk about the bull case. This is fundamentally not based off my own opinion or any financial advice. It's just what Standard Charters has said. So in 2026, for an example, this bull case for $8 to $10, and that's US dollars, it depends on sustained institutional demand. That's the ETF inflows that we're talking about, and Kane will be talking about that in a moment. We need to have support from the Clarity Act, which could unlock a lot of compliance allocations and across banks and asset managers. And if we can maintain about $300 to $500 million in inflows throughout this year. The base case is sort of more slower, steady adoption. Into ETF inflows remain quite positive, but moderate, and they're averaging, say, between $250 to $350 million a month. So rather than $750 to $1.2 billion, which is the case, it's a little bit less. And also need to start seeing RLUSD, the Ripple stablecoin adoption grow gradually. We need to see regulatory clarity around stablecoins, and that's kind of what we need to see for around that $4 to $6 mark. And then I guess in the bear case, for an example, the macro and regulatory headwinds they don't allow much of a way forward for stablecoins and for companies like Ripple. The interest rates creep higher, Bitcoin breaks below 70K, and delays in the Clarity Act could cause it to sort of stay around where it is, or even drop a bit further. So, that's if there's not much uptick in the Ripple stablecoin RLUSD. If there's a lot of macro uncertainty and banks don't start to adopt it for whatever reason. So that's how we start to see a lot more institutional adoption. Some of the different tiers that we could see in 2026. That's kind of for this cover this point well. CBDCs are quite controversial. I think everybody has polarizing opinions about them. Maybe they do like them, they don't. If you want to leave some comments in the chat about your personal thoughts, but really XRP, it's not a CBDC itself, but it does solve a very, very big problem that the central banks don't don't have, which is interoperability. So central banks can build their own digital currencies, but they won't talk to each other, these systems. A central bank in America versus Australia versus anywhere else in the world, in Europe, they won't communicate. So this is where XRP could become very valuable as a neutral bridge asset between the different CBDCs. So the CBDCs, all of a sudden, they're using the same bridge currency XRP. Things are settling in 3 to 5 seconds. Messaging is simplified because it doesn't have to go through many intermediaries. It works 24/7. There's no waiting till Monday after the weekend to use the Swift system. And it reduces again the billions of dollars that just sit idle with the old traditional system, right? So, this is the way forward for CBDCs. Pretty much, it modernizes national money. XRP connects the systems globally, and there's a lot of central banks across the world that are testing this. For an example, especially in Japan, there's a lot of governments in Japan. There's a lot of in China, and they're always doing this in the background. The digital euro. These economies, they're going to set the standards for the new world trade and how cross-border settlement happens. So there's a lot of testing happening in the background. CBDCs, personally, I'm not too favorable on that direction, but that's just all I wanted to cover off for there. So, Kane, did you want to sort of talk about the on-chain metrics for XRP and take off this next part?
Yeah, definitely. I just before I continue on, there was just one question. Daniel Shelton, he mentioned, couldn't you make your international transfers with a stablecoin as it's not as volatile like XRP? And I'll just quickly touch on this because it can be a little bit confusing because XRP is the native token for the ledger, for the Ripple ledger. Basically, this is just the gas token. We use this to pay like the transactional cost for a transfer to go through. So basically, what it means is that when more people want to use the network, they have to have XRP so they can send the stable coin to that destination, or they might send a different asset to a destination. So it's not more or less used in a way to like use as a one-to-one, like to back a certain asset. It's more just for the transactional purposes. But yeah, happy to move forward now. So just before I get started, I'll just quickly note that I do focus like primarily on fundamental analysis. I know obviously there's technical analysis, but my forte and what I spent most of my time when I was working at different funds was in fundamentals. So looking at the key metrics and things like that. But I want to quickly note that when it comes to XRP, it's pretty important to be clear from the start that this isn't a token you really analyze purely on the traditional crypto metrics. And that said, I'll still show these for the sake of comparison and outline where it currently stands compared to some of its competitors. But yeah, so first of all, we'll look at the stablecoin transaction volume, which is at the top left here. And we're just comparing it to things like Ethereum, Solana, and Sui. So these are 3 layer 1 blockchains as well. As you can see, Ripple currently does $250 million in stablecoin volume, whereas you've got Ethereum, it does $430 billion. They are currently the biggest stablecoin destination chain at the moment. They hold the most stablecoins. And part of the reason behind this is because Ripple only recently launched their stablecoin. So they're still currently trying to make up a little bit of a gap that has been made from Ethereum. And this is an important metric to look at because over time, we want to see Ripple really concentrate on stablecoin transactional volume because they want to be a global payment system. If they want to be, a complementary to the Swift system, they want to be able to show that they can transact large amounts and really quickly. So this one over time is going to be a key one that we will be looking at. Down the bottom left, we have TVL, which is the total value locked, or the total amount of liquidity that circulates in a certain ecosystem or chain. So for example, we've got Ethereum, Solana, Sui, and XRP again. As you can see the numbers, Ethereum's the biggest chain in terms of how many assets in dollar value is currently in their system, $75 billion. Solana sits at 9 billion, Sui around 1 billion, XRP 73 million. This is solely because, again, XRP doesn't really have any other assets outside of XRP on their chain. The only other ones they've got is their newly released stable coin. So, yeah, when we look at the FTV to TVL ratio, like we start to see some, numbers that are able to compare against the top three, which is Ethereum, Solana, and Sui. This is what I like to look at. But obviously, you look at XRP and you're like, why is this number so big? And that's why this one's so hard to look at the fundamentals or the key metrics that other chains are used to compare against, because it's not really looking to do the same thing as those. These are trying to build ecosystems for DeFi, for tokenization. This one is more just around global payments. They're not looking to do that same thing. So I think in the top right, it kind of really summarizes this, because despite all these you might think are lackluster stats for XRP, it's currently sitting second in terms of market cap amongst these. So sitting at $125 billion in market cap. Ethereum's around 375 billion, but it just goes to show that, despite these types of numbers we're seeing, this is still arguably valued at, it is one of the top three, top four assets in the whole digital asset space. So yeah, I think that more or less, like when it comes to on-chain activity, DeFi usage, fee generation, if you line up XRP against these newer layer ones and DeFi ecosystems, the numbers don't particularly look exciting. And I don't really think that's a controversial thing to say, but that's what I think makes XRP so interesting. Out of all the assets in crypto, XRP is probably arguably the most speculative, in my opinion. And that's not because it lacks utility or value, because obviously it's valued at $125 billion at the moment. And George did mention what utility it is looking to solve, and it currently has. But it's more because of what the community investors believe it could become. So that's why it's the most speculative, because everyone has that common belief that this is going to be that thing that, comes up and complements our current financial system.
Also, Cam, we saw a huge price rise in XRP post the announcement that there was going to be a lot of favorable tax treatments for US-based crypto companies.
Yeah.
That caused this huge price spike that we saw, and Dave will probably cover that in the technical analysis section in a few moments. So that's something that I thought I'd worth mentioning. I don't know if we covered it earlier.
Yeah, no, it's something I will cover a little bit further down. But yeah, I think it's really important, because it's like, this is more about future positioning for XRP, not really and more about the narrative rather than looking at these statistics. And yeah, in my view, I think XRP has one of the most loyal and persistent communities in crypto. It's a community that's held through multiple cycles. We've had lawsuits, we've had delistings. There was regulatory uncertainty at some points where they were in a bit of a pickle with the SEC. And, we're still here. Like, they're still accumulating this asset. They're still pushing this narrative that you've mentioned, George, forward. And in crypto in particular, I like to think that belief is capital, because if you have a strong belief and strong community, this is a very, very strong value proposition in itself. And I think XRP really exceeds most other assets in this field. So if we were to quickly move on, yeah, awesome. So I'll quickly touch on XRP's ETF flows, because this is something that we can look at from a comparative point and is still extremely important for just understanding what type of adoption or institutional interest we currently are seeing for XRP on a major scale, because these are obviously spot listed ETFs in the USA. So this was launched, I believe, in November, mid-November. In at the start, as you can see, we had $250 million in inflows on the first day. So extremely strong start to XRP's ETF debut. And then we had two other days where we saw over $100 million of inflows. So obviously that goes to show we're seeing there are people who are wanting to adopt this asset or at least speculate on it. And even as the broader market has started to cool, and we did see that bearish drop in October and November, XRP's inflows have been basically positive every single day bar one, which was one outflow day. So it just goes, yeah, I think it is showing that there is the interest. It is starting to separate itself from just being just speculation, because now it's getting more institutional adoption. And down the bottom left, where we can actually see where it kind of compares against the other ETFs in terms of assets under management. I did mention this earlier on, but it sits around $1 billion, and that's basically within 2 months. Bitcoin's been obviously around for 2 years now, the ETF, and Ethereum's been around for about 1.5. So, it does have some catching up to do to get to the same level, but it's had a really, really strong start.
Interesting to see that it's double Solana.
Yeah, exactly. So Solana was the one that is also really new. It began 26th of December, I believe. So yeah, that one's also showing some good strength. If you go to the next page, I think this will kind of give you a bit of a better outlook, because now we can kind of compare it against the first initial performance of, say, the Ethereum ETF. And with Ethereum's ETF, the first day was $107 million of inflows. XRP's was 250, Ethereum's was 107. Obviously, there is one thing to note, is they did have a lot of sell pressure coming from Grayscale. There was a fund prior to this where they could redeem those assets, and they were selling it. So it is a little bit distorted in that way. But yeah, Ethereum had multiple consecutive outflow days because of that, and it did kind of tamper its performance. So once we started to see the exhaustion of those sellers towards the back end of November in 2024, that's when we started to see Ethereum really rally past $3,500, and that's because inflows became positive again. So that's why this is extremely important. Inflows obviously really have a really strong effect on price. You can even see in halfway through 2025, we started to see really strong inflows, and then price follows it in the same way, because as we start to see more money entering it, more accumulation by these big fund managers into their ETFs, less on centralized exchanges, and the demand kind of kicks in, that whole supply pressure. And then yeah, we can quickly look over at Solana. This was the newer one that I said. This has also had positive net flows for the last 16 days, which is the time it's been available on the market. And if you look at the inflows, they're kind of maxing out around that 140 million. So actually, it can quite a lot less than what we saw XRP get on its initial debut day. And they also didn't have much sell pressure at the start. So this is just going to show Solana, very, very strong fundamental asset. And then XRP is getting more inflows into its ETF. So it's a good way to compare what type of institutional and retail adoption there currently is. And yeah, I think that more or less sums up that part. I'll just quickly add a few last points, because I think the dominant speculative thesis around XRP is massive, because as we've mentioned, it's about the global payment system and having that complete, to have that cross-border settlement and things like that. So whether or not that fully materializes is almost beside the point, in my opinion, because what really matters is that millions of people believe it can. And that's really what you need for an asset to go from here to here. It doesn't necessarily have to materialize. This is the whole point of speculation, because you don't really know if it's going to happen and the potential outcome. So yeah, a quick few catalysts that I'll just take note of. One of them was the one you mentioned earlier, George. So these are things we're potentially going to see in 2026, which is XRP as a US-based token. There were talks about, or at least speculation around there being tax exemptions when it comes to capital gains on US-based tokens. And I think you'll be able to see that in the chart when Dave gets that up. There was a massive spike in November around that speculation. So that is all to do with US wanting to be the epicenter and of innovation for crypto. The other thing is it was included as one of the only 5 assets referenced in the US digital asset treasury discussion. So when the US were discussing which assets they will hold, if they were to seize assets from certain people, XRP was amongst the ones that they said they would hold. XRP also was the 4th digital asset to receive an ETF in the US. So that means that it, out of every asset in crypto, is basically the 4th most mature, or it's within the top 4 because it's got that institutional adoption narrative. And then the ETF flows, as we've mentioned, this is going to be really important to watch over the next 6 months to the year to see how it really stacks up against the other assets. And yeah, so I think it's not an asset you have to necessarily has to win on every metric, but the narrative's there, and I think the community is the one that are going to push this if it is to reach the highs it does.
Amazing. That's a really good segue into, market bubbles and speculation. I think there's no one better, Dave, than you that picking a trend, from overhyped to, no interest, calling the commodities super cycle or cycle very early on. I know that you mentioned silver, so please take it away from here and let's look at the technical perspective from someone that's pretty renowned in the space.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you. I'm having flashbacks to when I was a teacher in England, because I remember 15 years ago, they have this thing over there called Ofsted, which is where they come in, they check out the school and they go and watch every teacher and they give you a rating and everything. And funnily enough, the one time they came to watch me, my whiteboard broke right before they stepped into the lesson. So I had to I had to kind of be, and funnily enough, right now, for whatever reason, TradingView is not letting me, it's just not loading it. I'm getting everything else but TradingView. I don't know if it's down for anyone else. But anyway, I found some ways to get around it. I can do it all through other ways, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, I can't pull up TradingView. So what I'm going to do anyway, guys, before I dive into the chart, you'll hear a lot of speculation around XRPs going to $500 and things like that. So I just want to talk around why that's probably very unlikely, just because of market cap and things like that, which is, you probably heard back in the day, 2021, Doge went from point something of a cent up to $1, and then Shiba came out, and then Shiba was the next one. Man, if this goes to $1, I'm going to be rich. People not understanding circulating supply, market cap, and things like that. So if you look at Ripple, which, can you see CoinGecko right now, everyone?
Just
yep.
wait.
Yep.
To share screen.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep. So CoinGecko, the market cap's 130 billion, but that's circulating supply, which is only 60. There's actually 100. Okay, so when you've got the fully diluted valuation, it's actually over 200 billion already. Okay, so you've got to realize the market cap of this thing is already 200 billion, and it's currently at $2. Okay, so if it was to get to $500, that's another, 250x from here. Okay, So that means it would have a $50 trillion market cap. Okay, so I just wanted to really taper the expectations when you start hearing these numbers of XRP is going to $500, this and that. That means that it has to be a $50 trillion asset. And then if you actually look at what that means it would become the #1 asset in the world. It would be larger than gold right now. Okay, so maybe it can get there in time. I'm talking decades and decades and decades. But for those people thinking it's going to happen in the next couple of years and you're going to be retired on your own private island, just probably taper those expectations, which is why this kind of analysis will probably make a bit more sense, which is where, yeah, you're kind of looking more similar to what George and Kane had as well, is that high end is up around that $8-10 range, not up in the hundreds and hundreds kind of thing. This cycle, then you get the correction, and then it'll kind of happen again. But what I want to do is, it's easy for me just to say all these numbers and do it. But how about I show you a video that I actually did over a year ago, December 2024, I think it was. No, sorry, December 2024. So, over a year ago. And this was the video that I did on YouTube there, showing where we're at, where it's going. And you'll notice, and I actually forecasted what it's doing, where it's going. Then what I've actually done is I've had Shane, who's our master Elliotician here at Master of the Markets. I've had him apply his Elliott wave right now to where it's at, which aligns pretty closely to what I've got. But I'm going to show you this video because then you'll understand where it's at in the cycle, where it's going, and you'll understand why it's still got lots of upside. All right, so I'm just going to play that now. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Not sure if you can hear the sound, Kane, on this.
Can you or not?
No, sorry.
Oh, you can't hear the sound?
No, sorry. I thought you meant could I hear you, but no.
Oh, okay. Hang on. That's not going to work then. So what we need to do is go into mute and make sure audio settings. Oh, you know what? That's okay. I'll just actually skip forward to where it goes anyway. I can just show you on the videos. So it had just broken up out of that level, which shot up. Okay, you're up here around close to the all-time high, up around that $4. Okay, so then from there, I was talking about the fact here that the reason you probably heard last cycle, XRP was a bit of a joke. Okay, everything else was taken off in that 2021 bull market, and XRP didn't. Okay, because XRP, that's here, XRP had actually peaked in the 2017 cycle. The reason why is because XRP was one of the OG altcoins. So it actually had a whole cycle's worth of data prior to the other altcoins. So XRP had actually completed its whole first cycle in 2017, and then it had to retrace that whole move that came down into that perfect zag zone there. Okay, that's why it got so much rubbish and so much, oh, it's shit, it's done this, it's, it hasn't even taken out the all-time high, because it was on a different cycle. Okay, so 2013 up to 2017 had its first bull market, retraced that whole move, and that bull run in 2021, that was that wave one, okay, which was the accumulation phase, that first phase. You can see after that it's retraced, and that went into this long sideways accumulation. Okay, that's textbook stuff for reaccumulation before an explosive move. Okay, so
is it possible for you to zoom in? I'm not sure if it's just blurry for me on a little bit zooming in.
I don't know if I can because it's a video. It's a shame I can't show the video.
That's okay. I can still see it at a bird's eye view. I just want to get my eyesight getting late in the evening. Or
no. It's because it's because I've paused it. And unfortunately, I can't pull up on TradingView because for whatever reason, I'm blocked out of it for now. But you've had that move there, you've pulled up. And then I'm just going to zoom ahead so you can see that's your healthy zag zone. So this correction here, this move from 2017 to 2021, that was just correcting this bull market. Okay. Then you've had your bull market here, your first thing, then you've had the correction. Then you've had a move up, nice reaccumulation, and that's why you've had this explosion rate. A saying that we always say is bigger the base, bigger the explosion. So the fact that it had gone sideways for that amount of period is actually an extremely bullish thing, which is why once it got released, it just absolutely exploded. Okay. And what I talk about is that exact same thing is what happened on silver just recently as well. Gonna come up here. All right, so what I'm talking about here is you've had the first wave up, that's this one. You've had the pullback, that's this one. And then where you're at here is this one, the 1, 2, and you're about to break out. So you're still, kind of in the middle of the move. You're still only just beginning. You've had one move up, pullback, and now you're dead in this middle of that wave 3 right now, okay? So what I'm talking about in this video is that we're going to come up and then you're going to get that pullback and then we're going to get the excess phase. So I'm going to come up, push forward again. And this is where I'm moving to silver and talk about that. It's the exact same setup that we had on silver during that same period. Silver had that 50-year bull market. It corrected the whole bull market down for that 20 years there. Had the big zag, healthy correction, had the next move up, the pullback, and then that same thing that recommenced ready for that breakout. And I was talking about how XRP's got the exact same setup that silver's got before that likely explosion, which we all know silver is up here now at about $90. It has absolutely exploded just like it should have. Exact same setup that XRP's got as well. Again, it's a shame I can't show you the audio. Okay, so here, what I'm talking about here is that we're going to get a healthy correction. Okay, so I talk about the fact that we're going to get a nice pullback and then a move up to here. The reason why I've got this level here is because it's the 1.618. And I talk about that. It's actually hilarious how the 1.618 actually aligns with the previous all-time high at that $3.30. So if you look here, that move up, pullback, explosive wave 3, the wave 4 pullback, the wave 5 up to that 330, and then that nice pullback back down here to around that $1.30 range. So this is where what I'll show you is that's exactly what's happened on, let me just see if TradingView is working. Come on, please. No deal. But you can see it's here. Okay, so that first move back, we had the pullback. You had the next move up right to that old all-time high, which was the 1.618 pullback. And then we had that nice pullback down here to around that high 1 kind of zone. So exactly what I was talking about in this video here, coming back. All right, so that's that wave. Okay, so wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, wave 5. We're getting that nice deep correction down. And then from there, we should be now getting your next wave 5 up from that area, which is right now, we're around this area here right now. Okay, so I'll pull up. And then the targets that I've got here is kind of conservative around the $5 mark here. Okay, and if I've got it up around, I think the 8 to 10, if it goes up to the higher zones as well. So yeah, sorry about the the TradingView down and the audio down, but hopefully you like my narrative along the way as well. But what I'll do now is I'll show you what Shane had, which will be a lot clearer and you can actually see it. So this is it here. All right, the 1, the 2, the 3, 4, 5, and then coming back this level here, that 125, which is when we had that, that big crash in all the markets going out, that should be the completed wave 4 there. So now what we're having is that we should have that move coming up now towards that $5 mark. So this is a certified master Elliotician who get 90% of all of that. And there's only less than 50 of these in the world. And he had what I had a year ago as well playing out right now. So that's 2 expert educators that know their Elliott waves that have predicted the exact same thing. So there should still be more upside. What I don't know is, does it come a little bit further down first before we head up? Okay, but super bullish. This is your wave 1, wave 2, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you should get some kind of really big, deeper correction. Once you hit that $6 to $10 mark, it'll probably freak a lot of people out. Then you're going to get that explosive move up towards the, whatever it goes, teens, 10s, 20s. I won't be able to measure that out until it's played out. But that is the kind of bigger picture, is that, yeah, we should get a move up to around this $4 to $6 mark in this next coming move. But yeah, just really wanted to taper expectations of the $500, just going by market cap, reality, things like that. That yeah, it'll be a long time before you're seeing that kind of market cap.
Good to know that you can predict the future, Dave.
Yeah, it's when you said XRP, I put up as a wow, that's exactly what I posted on the YouTube over a year ago. And it was just using Elliott waves, knowing cycles, knowing, that everything moves. It's just human psychology. People understand things in threes, then it pulls back. So we should still get that next move up.
Amazing. I think it's sort of aligning with people are very optimistic about 2026, especially after last night and the rebound in the XRP. I think it feels like sentiment is improving, so it could align with the technicals there. We have to just wait and see. But I know that not many of my clients have sold XRP; they're still holding on, and so it's great to see that that's potentially happening in the charts. I think there's was there anything else you want to cover off, Dave? There, should we jump a little bit at just answering a few questions that came through? Just a couple there, if we have a bit of time.
I was going to show Bitcoin as well, but unfortunately I can't pull up TradingView. So what I promised to the community guys is when I get home, I'll put up a YouTube straight away going through what I'm seeing on Bitcoin, crypto, etc., and I can do it properly. So I'll grab this link and put it in the chat so you can so you can see that tonight. But the main thing I want to talk about with XRP is, remember, when you're buying an altcoin, you're taking on more risk. Okay, Bitcoin's the benchmark. So why are you buying XRP over Bitcoin? It must outperform it. If you pull up the XRP Bitcoin chart, it's still bullish. And I can't actually, why don't you pull that up for me, and I'll just talk about the key level.
Dave, if you go to Seth mentioned, and I think this is right. If you go to CoinMarketCap, their website, I believe they've got a trading view built in. So
that's what I'm like. It's blocked. Look in CoinGecko, I go trading view and it's blocked. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, maybe like a VPN or something you've got going? I'm not. Maybe. Otherwise, I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
if you want to.
Yeah.
If you just want to put up the XRP Bitcoin pairing, because I'll just talk about the key level. That's the thing you should be looking at, not the USDT pair. Because once that Bitcoin pairing breaks bullish, that's where it's going to go absolutely ballistic. So I did want to point that out. If you can share that, I'll show the key level.
XRP Bitcoin pairing. Yep. I'll just quickly get that up.
In the background, Dave, see if incognito mode helps you access that, or different browsers.
Okay. So if I go incognito, that's what over here is it? New private window.
Oh, sorry, I'll just quickly get.
Come on. Yeah, it's super weird. I don't know what's going on. It's just really weird that TradingView is not working, but everything else is.
Can't really see my screen.
Not yet.
It's not on.
I think I've got to stop sharing first. Hang on. Sorry. Yep. Done.
Did you want to go on a weekly time frame?
Yeah, if you can show me the weekly, I'll show the key level.
All right, cool. Sorry, I'm gonna have to zoom out a little.
Yeah. So that level there, that 0.0003. Yeah, around that. Yeah, around there. If you get up above that level, it's gonna go ballistic. Yep. Yeah. Okay, because you'll see just prior to that, you've got the little first 5 waves up. You've had that pullback. And yeah, the minute you go through that blue line, that is where XRP changes market structure on the weekly against Bitcoin. And that is where you're going to get that massive flow. So yeah, just have an alert set on that one. And once you get that, you're going to get a very, very, very fast move.
Yeah, just even looking at it, like multiple times it's broken above is almost like pretty parabolic move up, as you can see, breaking above that level.
So yeah, so alert on that, whatever it is, 4 zeros and a 3 on XRP. But yeah, apologies for that, guys. Like I said, it feels like 15 years ago. I can't believe it. The one thing I need is not working for me, but I will put up a YouTube video tonight for everyone with with all the proper analysis, etc. as well. But go back and watch that video I did on YouTube on XRP and with audio, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And you'll see that it's following it to the T and that there is still upside to go.
For the recording, what we'll do is we'll edit it, Dave, the new video, and we'll crop it in so we'll include your
Perfect.
which will solve everything. Okay. So I guess let's just have maybe 5 minutes or so just to go through and look at some of the questions that were asked. I'm gonna have to scroll up a little bit here. Somebody asked, can we cover off XLM in future webinars? Definitely can in the future. I guess the reason why we didn't really talk about XLM, HBAR, XDC, all these ISO tokens is because to me, they're very similar in a trade because a lot of my clients, they typically, if they own XRP, they're likely to own HBAR or XLM. What happens is they get put in a basket. And so, yes, they're very similar in technology in terms of they're trying to solve the same problem. Maybe one has a lot more, I guess, development in terms of its, adoption and its utility and its function. But I think XLM serves a similar function it's the same thing, very fast, maybe probably fractional difference in terms of the technology, but we can cover up that off in the future. There was also somebody who asked around, couldn't you just use stable coins instead of, I guess, XRP?
I think we mentioned that one already.
We covered that question.
Yeah.
Kane, there was one more question around, doesn't XRP, they hold a large amount of circulating supply that they can then potentially dump on into the market. Is that something that you have the tokenomics on, a little bit of detail, and you can shed some light on that?
Yeah, basically this has been an ongoing thing for a little bit now. The Ripple Foundation does hold a decent portion of the supply. It is natural for different tokens to have ecosystem specific supply that they use it for the incentives or like the slow distribution into the market. So they do have it. There has been talks about them selling previously. I'm not too sure what the percentage is, but I believe it was quite high. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what it is at the moment though.
Okay. There's another question around, can we yield XRP in Australia in institutional custody? Scott, actually, familiar name. So at the moment, there is no yield products in Australia or the world. I guess it's still very early days in generating yield with institutional custody. We are exploring what that looks like in 2026. So we'll have an update for all of our clients very soon because it's very requested on Bitcoin. If all the majors is how do we earn some yield? So we'll be updating you in the next few months, I'd say, or even earlier on that point. Somebody's asked for my personal price prediction on XRP. I don't typically give price predictions myself, although I think it aligns very well with some of the potential fib targets or macro wave targets that Dave has covered off from a technical perspective. I think that there could be some scope for it to potentially go higher than that if there's a huge blow off top scenario that comes in and goes into some crazy territories. But we don't have a crystal ball. It could also go down if the macro data starts to go in the other direction.
Yeah, and I just quickly, I also think you can't bet against the XRP army there, time after time, because again, they don't always align with the fundamental analysis that I do personally. I don't personally hold it, but time after time, I see, this community drive this token, and through speculation and through the, persistence of this narrative, it does extraordinary things. So hard to bet against this token.
And then somebody asked around for that $4 to $6 move, when would you anticipate that taking place, Dave? I guess time-wise, I'm not sure if you.
That's a weekly chart, so you're probably, probably this year. Yeah, so there's two things that could happen with crypto. We turn around now. Everyone's expecting the bear market in 2026. Everyone's on the other side that way, and it surprises that way. We go up, have a bullish 2026, and then have a rollover at the very end of 2026. It really just depends on how the traditional markets hold up. I did a post about it the other day saying I'm seeing major topping signals in the NASDAQ. I just don't know if it's kind of like going to be that early April period or that later on October. If it's that later October period, then crypto could have a beautiful run for most of 2026 and absolutely shock everybody. And have these last waves up. The key level on Bitcoin to keep an eye on is 106K. If you get above $106,000, it's going to take out the all-time high. So keep an eye on that level there, and if we can get up there,
Amazing. And then there was one other question. I think Kane, this is a good one for you. A little bit around market cap statements that XRP value is tied to its adoption and utility. I think we kind of answered that in that, a lot of that is tied to its utility and value around perceived value of how much adoption it can take amongst central banks, amongst institutional banks that want to use it as a bridging currency in the new financial system. Absolutely, there's a possibility that if it gets adopted by all the central banks, then they have to purchase XRP to be used as a bridge currency. But it's a very, very bold statement to make in that respect of achieving that goal. So I guess that's kind of the way I'd help understand that question around utility. And Kane also touched on it in the sense that a lot of the hype and the speculation is sometimes there's a disparity between potentially market value and real value, I guess, in a sense of inherent utility value. We see that all the time in assets, right? We see assets become overpriced relative to its, like PE ratios, for an example, price earnings in that respect, in the traditional sense. And that's something that I would comment on. Does anyone else want to add into that before I look at one more other question?
Yeah, just quickly, I think they mentioned that therefore it can also be possible in the near future, in the short term, to hit $500. But I think the truth is this isn't a short term play for XRP anyway. If it was to ever reach that scale, it's not within that short term. It's a very much a longer term narrative. And it's not something that will realistically ever happen overnight, especially because of the regulatory frameworks and uncertainty around the whole sector. So I think it is still very much, a long-term vision if it is to ever to come to fruition.
And there's one question from Roy Chan. I'm not sure if you already are in the MTM community. Highly recommend it because that's where you get a lot of insights. But is asked, if they're doing TA, would you mind sharing your personal price target for silver, Dave? So,
me, yeah. Unfortunately, I can't show the level, but I don't so much have price targets. What I do have is I'm looking at seasonality. Okay, so seasonality anywhere from February onwards, but in particular March, April is where weakness often comes in. So that excess phase, the final wave, will go up and lower in volume, divergence, and I'll start seeing signs of weakness. So when I start seeing those signs of weakness that I typically see at the top, and it starts lining up with, I know that seasonality, that's where I'm going to start. So I'm not so much looking at targets. Maybe somewhere in that 100 to 104, there could be a level. If you can get through that, it could go to 130, 140, or if it goes absolutely moonshot, it could actually even get up to 200 before. It just depends. But I'm more looking at I'm not really a person that says more price targets. I'm more looking at I'm more looking at that a couple more months. If you look at a lot of the miners, etc., as well, they are kind of just starting to break out a bit more now as well. So we should still have a good couple of months, but expect some volatility because they're not going to let it go up that quickly without a fight. So there's going to be a lot of quick, sharp pullbacks, get people really frightened. Silver does that a lot, goes up really fast, but it also pulls back really sharply. And then it goes again and again. You probably already noticed it. So yeah, just going to ride it day by day. And once I start seeing some weakness, don't worry, I'll put it all over my socials when I do.
Just one last quick one. Again, it's for you, Dave. Someone's just asked for a quick opinion on Bitcoin dominance at the moment, and how that factors in.
Yeah, I looked at it on the weekly outlook just recently, and it's all like we've been bullish on crypto for the last, I think, 3, maybe 4 weeks. But I've only been bullish for a bounce at the moment. Okay. And that's why I said I'm bullish for this bounce up to here. Then we'll assess how the moves come in. So far the bullish bounce is playing out. But yeah, at the moment, Bitcoin dominance is going down, others dominance is going up, others is going up. Like all the bullish signals are there right now, but at the moment it's still just for that corrective wave. I still need more data before I know if it's something else for now. But one good thing that we did notice is that the Russell 2000 broke out and also broke out towards the S&P 500. And if you look at history, I think it has like a 90% correlation with the Russell 2000. So it's a good sign that the Russell 2000 is broken up because altcoins have an over 90% correlation with that. So fingers crossed.
Amazing. That's definitely something I'm looking forward to. So I guess, if you are wanting to discuss how do you transfer XRP safely, or is there a safe custody to use, or a place you can go to have a home to actually liquidate? I know a lot of you were asking for that or having that in the back of your mind around what avenues are there that aren't sort of exchanges where things can go wrong. Would love to have a chat with you, if that sounds like you, just to sort of see if it's the right fit in terms of selling your XRP at some point in the future, or what that looks like with UpTrade. And so, yeah, I think we should conclude the webinar here at this point. I think we've gone a little bit over time, perhaps.
Perfect.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.